right, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Guitar Genius Chat. I am Mike Philippov, of course, and today we are talking about how to practice musical creativity. This is a very misunderstood topic as well as a very important topic because once you go through the process of developing all your technique and fretboard knowledge and ear training and phrasing and all that stuff, you got to be able to do something with those skills to really feel fulfilled as a musician. And so to help me cover this topic, I brought on a very special guest, a true master of this topic, someone I learned a tremendous amount from, Mr. Tom Hess. Let me see if I can get the video working here. There you go. Hi, Tom Hess. Good to have you
Mike.
here.
Good to have you. Good to be here, buddy.
All right. So to begin, I want to hear your take on this belief that a lot of guitar players have when it comes to creativity, and that is they need to have reached a certain level, either with their technique or music theory knowledge or whatever it is, before they can even ponder things like being creative with improvising, writing solo songs or whatever. I have obviously my thoughts on this that I've made known over the years, and I'm sure you do as well. So I want to hear your take. Do you agree, disagree, and why?
Well, yeah, I think people often approach guitar playing in general in a very linear way. First, you got to do this, then you got to do that, then you got to. It's like a checklist, and they think that they've got to check off each box before they can do the next thing or go to the next level or whatever. And yeah, that's a big mistake. So, when we started off as beginners, we couldn't do anything. We didn't know anything. We couldn't play anything. Okay. Guitar wasn't very fun. All right. We were just all clueless and stuck and frustrated. Okay. But what becomes really frustrating for people, and I've seen this over many years, and I know you have too, and I've experienced it myself when I was learning how to play, was that you start developing skills in one area, maybe technique or something about music theory or whatever. And then you have these big, massive gaping holes, like your phrasing is no good, the timing is horrible, you're not creative, you can't write a song, you can't improvise. And it feels really frustrating because you're not a beginner in, let's say, this area over here, but in this other area, creativity, phrasing, improvising, soloing, songwriting, whatever, you feel like you're totally, at a lower level. So you've got skills over here and you got a big hole here and you can't use this stuff. So what good is that stuff if you can't use it because you're way down here? So that's my first kind of thing that I would, suggest to people is start now with phrasing, creativity, improvising. Don't get so stuck only on one thing, whether that's ear training or technique or picking or music theory or whatever. You want to start being creative with the things that you're doing. So if you're practicing something technical, let's say like an arpeggio or a lick, part of a song or a solo or a scale or whatever, if you're going to sit there and practice that thing 500 times in a row, why not make 5 or 10 variations of that same thing? Little different phrasing, a little bit more creative, just create different variations of it and practice those 10 variations 50 times. You're still essentially getting the 500 repetitions in, but it's not 500 stale repetitions. You can still focus on the technique, still think about the picking and the fingering and the synchronization. You can still do all of that, but maybe create some variation so it sounds different. The rhythm is a little bit different. The vibrato, the phrasing, the slides, the bends, all of that stuff is a little bit different. You can start working on some degree of creativity, even when you're just woodshedding the technique or whatever. It doesn't have to be mindless, which a lot of people, when they're practicing technique, it becomes mindless. They focus in the beginning, and then it gets boring to concentrate, so they don't, and they kind of just go on autopilot, and who knows what's happening technically. You're not really paying attention, but creativity is not being practiced, phrasing, expression. It's just something that they think they'll do later, someday, and by the time someday comes, they got their technique together, but they sound bad. They just can't play anything that sounds good. They can wiggle their fingers, they can pick, but it's all garbage. Okay, because there's no phrasing, there's no feeling there, there's nothing to it, and that's because they've got the priority out of order.
Right. And that was one of the biggest realizations I had when I started studying with you, because I had pretty good technique by that point, but you kind of opened my eyes to not waiting until it was even better and start doing all these other things you mentioned. So that was very important for sure. So once somebody has some speed already, how would you recommend they practice using speed creatively? You mentioned some of the things like creating variations on just a lick in general, but if you can already play fast, how can you make that speed sound more creative and not just so robotic?
Okay. Let's take that question, which is a great question, and let's replace one word. Let's replace creativity just for a moment. We'll come back to it. Let's take the word creativity out of the question and insert expressiveness, because creativity is not just how many mathematical different combinations of this thing could I make, but really the purpose of creativity is to be expressive, to create something that feels good when you play it, sounds great when people listen to it. That's when people want to be creative. It's not like they want to be different just for the sake of being weird or different, but because there's a purpose, there's a reason why people pursue creativity, and that primarily is to be expressive. So if we just tweak the question a little bit to how can you use speed expressively, when you answer that question, we will at the same time also be answering the question, how can we use speed creatively? Okay. So the first thing that I'm going to suggest is, instead of looking at a fast lick or whatever, a technique, an exercise, part of a solo or a song, as a big string of notes, let's say that's our little lick. Okay, there's a bunch of notes here going up and down the guitar or whatever. Okay, instead of looking at this whole thing and saying I've got to practice this 100 times, 400 times for 2 weeks or whatever, and just getting the technique down, and then wondering, what can I do with this? How can I make it creative? Well, can I put it in this key or put it in a different tempo or a different style? That's adapting the lick. That's not being creative with the lick. Okay, so what I'm going to suggest is, when you have a technique or a lick or something that you're working on, inside of here, there are going to be more important notes and less important notes. They're not going to be equal. Okay. There's no such thing as communism in music. Okay. Some notes are going to be more important than others. Definitely. And if that's not true, something might be wrong with what you're choosing to play. Okay. So let's say this note was important and that note was important and that note was important. Okay. These three notes, let's say, are the structural pitches of the phrase or of the lick. Okay. Maybe they're the highest note. Maybe those are the notes that last longer, they sustain longer. They're longer notes than some of the other ones. Maybe they're important because they're chord tones, or maybe they're important because they're crucial dissonances. There are all kinds of reasons why these three notes might be more important than the other ones. Okay. So let's take a look at these three notes and let's see if we can get the phrasing, how it sounds, how it feels, how it's played, to be as expressive as we can make it. So forget about the lick for now. Find step one. Here's step one. Find the most important note, or the most important 2 or 3 notes. Okay. Maybe 4, but there probably wouldn't be more than 4 structural pitches within a phrase or a lick. Okay. At least find the most important note. Might be at the end, might be in the middle, who knows? All right, so that's step one, identify that. Step two is, ask yourself, why is this note the most important note? Is it because it's lasting longer? Is it because it's the climax of the lick? What about it makes it more important than the other notes? Then the next step is, once we've gotten that far, how can I make, let's say that this was the most important note. How can I make that note sound more expressive? How many different ways can I play this? Can I bend up to it? Can I slide into it? Can I use a different vibrato? Can I use a vibrato substitute? What can I do to extract more feeling out of that one note? Because here's the beautiful thing. Once you make the most important note, or the most important 2 or 3 notes, sound more expressive, something happens by default automatically. The whole lick sounds more expressive. The whole thing sounds better. Okay. So you don't have to worry about, how do I make the first note, the second note, the third note, how do I make all these 17 notes sound more expressive, you start with the structural pitches, the most important pitches, and you focus on making variations in how you play them, how you phrase them, how you approach them, how long you hold them out, what you do with them. Okay. Do you slide in? Do you do a backslide? Do you do vibrato? Do you bend the string? What do you do to make variations on those notes? That now, once you've done that, when you put them back into the context of the whole lick, the whole thing sounds more expressive because you've extracted the most important parts. You've played around with how can I make those most important notes more expressive? And now the creativity is much greater because you've taken those steps. This is an easy way to take a fast lick or a fast solo, extract out the most important parts, focus on the phrasing of them, make variations, and then plug it back in, and everything sounds better. And it works almost every single time. So that's my 60-second answer to your. There's more to it than that, but in a nutshell, that would be the first set of instructions I would give to somebody.
Yeah, I really like what you said in the very beginning about renaming the word, replacing the word creativity with expression, because creativity is so vague and abstract. It's hard to know exactly what you even mean by that term. But expression is something that you know what's expressive to you, because presumably you, I mean, people watching, have music that you like, and that music expresses something to you. So it's a lot more black and white when something is either expressive or isn't, or at least more expressive versus less expressive. So that's a really, really good insight. Awesome. So when it sounds like what you applied, what you just said, can be applied very easily to scale sequences, or at least that seems pretty clear to me, and I imagine to everybody watching. What about, say, arpeggios, where you are not necessarily, I mean, I'm sure you could. I know that you could pause and do the things you just described, but arpeggios are typically played more just straight up and down. So how might you be more expressive / creative when you're playing arpeggios?
Okay. Good question. So let's take two approaches here to keep this so we're not here all day. Let's take two approaches for this. The first one is a melodic approach, meaning a note choice approach. And then the second one is a rhythmic approach or a timing approach. So let's start with something like, let's say, we'll take E major, okay? E major chord. Got an arpeggio here. This is just an E major triad arpeggio. Now, with this arpeggio, if we just add one other note, and it doesn't even matter which one, but one other note that's in the key, let's presume we're in the key of E here, but that's not in the chord. So, for example, there's an A note in the key of E, but it's not in an E chord. So the A note would be the 4th or the 11th of the chord or of the scale. There it is right there. That's the A, that's the 11th. There it is again. So now we take an arpeggio, which is, it's nice, it sounds cool, but it's not all that expressive by itself. It's just a series of notes. But if we add in another note, I'll add in that A note again. Okay, now we have something that sounds a little bit more melodic. Okay, now we haven't done anything rhythmically yet in that last example I just played. So we have a melodic element added, but we don't have a rhythmic one yet. So let's do that. And I'll go back to what I played earlier. Stopping on that pitch. And now we have something more melodic because we've got our added note, the 11th. We're stopping on it to bring it out. There it is again. And we could end right there if we wanted to. If you want to play it faster. So it sounds pretty cool. We just take the arpeggio, we add one note. We can accent it by holding it out longer. That's called the Godjic stress. And it sounds more melodic. Now we can do that with any note. I just chose the 11th, but we could have chosen anything. We could have chosen the 9th or the 7th. Let's do the 7th. There's the major 7th there. So it sounds pretty cool. There's the 7th again up there. So I'm bringing it out, adding the note, sustaining it, putting a little vibrato, a little phrasing on it, and it sounds more melodic than the arpeggio would by itself. That's just an arpeggio. And there's really nothing melodic about it. They're just notes. Now we have something more to work with. So you can do that with any chord. If we went to an A chord, let's say, same key. Now I'm adding the 11th of that chord, which would be D sharp. Here's the A major arpeggio. And the sharp 11 is right here, 1 fret lower. Has a kind of Lydian sound. So again, we're just adding a note. If we take another arpeggio from that key, let's say C sharp minor. We play just a triad. They're just notes. Playing C sharp minor. But if we add another note, let's say the 9th. Right there's the 9th. And there it is again. So now it sounds more like a little melody within the arpeggio. That note adds a lot. So those are some easy ways. You can just take a note, any note from the key that's not in the chord, add it to the arpeggio. Doesn't even matter which one. They're all going to sound good. They'll sound different, but it works with any note from the key. You accent it, hold that note out, maybe a little vibrato or slide or bend or whatever. It's going to sound more melodic right away.
Awesome. Very cool. So I want to actually zoom out here, and I know this may open up a big can of worms, and I'm going to do my best to not allow it to. But I want to talk about the topic of expression. So you've been talking about this, obviously, in your answer so far. I am curious what mistakes you see when you hear guitar players either neglect expression entirely, or when they are trying to make something expressive, they think they are being more expressive, but they're not really. So maybe either list some of those mistakes or list some additional ways somebody might make a note more expressive on top of the ones you've already been mentioning. So I'll let you decide which direction to go.
Okay. All right. Let's see where we go with this. Well, let me just recap what I did say earlier real quick. And I think that the core mistake is that most people never practice for creativity or expression. It's just like most people don't practice improvising. They may do improvising. They may put on a backing track and improvise something over it, but they're engaging in improvising, but they're not practicing improvising. Okay. To give you an analogy, I know you understand this, of course, Mike. I'm talking, for everybody else. That's like saying this is practicing technique. Okay. I'm moving my fingers. I'm wiggling them around. I have no idea what I'm playing. I'm engaging in something technical. It's not very good. I'm engaging in it, but I'm not practicing it. My brain isn't focused on it. I don't have a specific goal in mind. I don't have specific objectives or anything in particular that I'm really trying to accomplish or a method to accomplish it. I'm just engaging in it. Now, as far as technical guitar playing technique, most people already intuitively understand that doing this is not practicing technique. right? We're just doing something technical. It sounds bad. It is bad, but people get that on their own. This is obvious to them. But when they think that they're being creative, they think that putting on a backing track and improvising is practicing improvising or phrasing, and it's not. That's not what that practice would look like. Okay, so to give you an example, most people, students or whoever, when they're let's say improvising, because improvising is a creative outlet. Most people, when they're improvising, they got a backing track. Okay, let's say it's in the key of A or whatever, and they start improvising or whatever. They play a lick, and then as soon as that lick's over, what do? Go to the next one. And then when that lick is over, what do? They go to the next one and the next one and the next one. They haven't practiced anything. Nothing got practiced. Okay. So then what happens is they do that every day. They might do it for a month. They might do it for 3 years. And you will get a little bit better doing that because you are getting some benefit by going through those motions. But all those benefits come very slowly and they're indirect. See, when I'm practicing my phrasing, which that's the main thing I do practice is phrasing, I'll play a phrase either with a backing track or without one. And I'll sit there and make 100 variations, little micro, how can I make that a little better? I don't go on to the next lick or the next technique or the next phrase. I'm doing the same thing, looking for other ways that I can squeeze more emotion out of it before I move on. I fix a little mistake here, technical mistake with the vibrato, maybe I'll do the bend different, maybe I'll do the slides a little bit different, trying to always squeeze more out of it. It's like trying to, if you have a wash rag and it's wet, trying to squeeze every drop of water that you can get out of it. I don't grab the next wash rag that's all wet and throw it around. Okay. So, and my phrasing is pretty good, and it's pretty good because I practice it. It's not good because I just played for a long time. That's not how it got developed. So I think for the people who make a conscious effort to squeeze the emotion out of what they're doing and make variations and always try to refine, always refine, just like people would refine their technique. People understand intuitively that that's what you're supposed to do. But when it comes to the creative side, the expressive side, improvising, songwriting, phrasing, they just don't do it. Songwriters, for example, they might spend 3 hours on a Saturday afternoon trying to write a song, and they're engaging in the act of songwriting, but they haven't practiced songwriting. Songwriting practice looks very different than sitting down trying to write a song. Just like practicing technique looks very different than trying to play your favorite AC/DC song. They're completely two different worlds. And it's always been a mystery to me why people don't naturally on their own get it that, hey, the way I approach my technical practice, isolated, focused, refinement, I could do that with phrasing, improvising, songwriting, all the creative aspects, but people just don't do that.
Yes.
That's one of the things I try and get people to do.
Exactly. And when it comes to technique, actually, since that's primarily the thing that people come to me for, I find the same thing is true where many people don't quite understand what refinement is. They think that refinement is something that's going to happen on its own through sheer number of repetitions that they do. Like it's just going to happen outside of the person practicing. But no, you have to make it happen. And so one thing I often tell students is to take a pause. You play something once, pause, play it back in your mind, and ask yourself, how good did it sound relative to how I want it to sound, relative to how John Petrucci played it or whatever. And when it comes to phrasing, it's the same thing. Whoever you like, Paul Gilbert, Andy LaRocque, Yngwie, any of those guys, when you play one of their licks, does it sound like the way they would play it? Even if it's the slowest thing in the world, does it sound as good as them? And if the answer is no, well, why not? That's the next logical question. What is missing? How do you make it better? So, like you said, it's the same thought process with technique and same thing with phrasing.
Yeah, Mike, you said something really important, and it may have kind of just brushed over a lot of people listening. you said first you made the comparison. If you play something, even if you play it really slowly, does it sound as good as whoever the players you're trying to emulate, even if you need to play it much, much, much slower? So in other words, if Jason Becker played the same lick at 25% speed and you played the same lick at 25% speed, and the speed is not limiting your ability to do it, because at 25% you can keep up, you can play the notes. Okay, presumably you can, a person can, but it still won't sound, usually it doesn't sound anywhere near as good as it sounds in the hands of a pro player like Jason Becker, for example. So what's the very important, I think, piece that you said was, you said you need to ask why. And that's the step that I think that people don't do. They just kind of accept that, well, I'm just not as good as so-and-so. I don't have the experience that they have. I don't have the technique. They kind of just throw their hands up in the air and say, well, I'm not that guy. I'm only at this. Yeah, but dude, you played it at 25% speed. That means that you don't need to have the speed in order to do this at a slow tempo.
Yeah, you don't have an excuse anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. You don't have an excuse. So if you don't ask the question, why is it not sounding as good? You can't fix it. You have no chance to fix it because you don't even know what to do. So asking that question is mission critical. You have to ask. From there, now we can get a plan. Now I can figure it out on my own, or I can get a guitar teacher to help me, but now I have a chance to build the phrasing, build the timing, build everything. As the speed comes up, everything else comes up with it. But without this, even when you get faster speed, it's not going to sound good. It's just not going to be there. And that's the thing that people miss. And it's really frustrating when you can finally play something smoother or faster and it just doesn't sound good. I mean, there's nothing more frustrating than having the skill and it still doesn't sound the way you want it to sound.
Exactly. All right. So we were talking a lot about refining of ideas that are already there, that already exist, that you already know. But what if you are trying to either improvise a solo or practicing coming up with ideas, and it's not, you got nothing? So how do you practice becoming more creative or expressive with that, with coming up with ideas?
Yeah, this is a really good question. I'm glad you asked this one. I think the starting point is you got to set yourself up for success. So if you're going to improvise a solo or try and write a song or write a solo or whatever, if you just look at a blank piece of paper or a blank file on your computer or look at your guitar and thinking, I don't know what to do. I guess we're in A minor, so I guess I'll start there. Or, and I'll just start improvising with trial and error. That's not trial and error is like getting in your car and just driving somewhere. You'll get somewhere, but it won't be where you want to get to. It won't be where you want to go. Okay, you'll just end up in the middle of the desert somewhere, or off a cliff or in a river or something. So I think the starting point is to look at, what am I soloing over? What is the rhythm? What are the chords? What's the backing track? What's the song I'm going to solo or improvise over? Okay. Not just what is the key, what are the chords, what notes are in those chords. That's technical stuff. That's music theory stuff. But when you listen to a chord progression, what is the feeling of each of those chords? What do they feel like all by themselves? So you're not touching your guitar, you're just listening. So if we were in A minor, those three chords, A minor, F, and E, not only do they sound different, but they feel different. And it's the difference in how they feel that gives you a roadmap to how you might play. For example, if you listen to Yngwie Malmsteen, almost any song, there are some exceptions to what I'm going to say, but almost any song, when there is a 4 chord, so if we're in the key of A minor, and there's a D minor chord played, the way that Yngwie plays over 4 is almost always different and very different than how he plays over 5. Okay. When the 5 chord comes in minor or harmonic minor, he's going to play more aggressive, He's going to play, there'll be more dissonance. He'll probably play faster. Okay. And the articulation is going to be really strong. When playing over, let's say, the 3 chord, it's likely not going to be like that. When he plays over the 4 chord, it's not going to be like, it's usually not going to be as fast. It's not going to be as aggressive most of the time. Okay. The articulation is going to be maybe more fluid. The feeling is more subdued compared to when he plays over the 5 chord. Why? Because the 4 chord feels different than the 5 chord. So what Yngwie often does, and many players do this, they follow the feeling of the chords. Okay, he's not sitting there thinking, okay, D minor. What are the notes in D minor? D, F, and A. I guess I'll play a lot of Ds, Fs, and As over the D minor chord. And then when the E chord comes, I'll play a bunch of E's, G sharps, and B's. That's not the thinking. It's this moment in time feels like this. I'm going to play like the chord feels most of the time. Not always, but most of the time. When the chord changes to 6 or 1 or 5, he's following the feeling of those chords. You hear this in blues too, 12-bar blues. In the hands of a really good blues player, when the chord progression goes from 1 to 4 or from 5 back to 4, the playing often reflects the energy or the feeling of those chords. It's not random. We're not just playing random blues licks and just sticking it. I mean, that's what amateurs would do. Okay. But Gary Moore, Stevie Ray Vaughan, that is not what they did. Okay. That is not how they approach it. If just listen carefully. Any great player, listen to the chords that they're playing over. How does the chord feel all by itself? Now, listen to how do they play over that feeling. And you'll notice this pattern, song after song, solo after solo after solo, player to player to player to player to player. You start seeing those kind of patterns. So that gives you a roadmap. So if you're in harmonic minor and the 5 chord comes or a diminished chord comes, you're likely going to play with maximum aggression, maximum passion. It's just going to drip with feeling, right? When the 6 chord comes, it's more a triumphant feel. It's not a dark, evil feel. It's not that feel. That's what the 5 chord is. Okay, but the 6 is different. So you're likely to play differently on that chord. I think that's really expressively, the chords are going to do half of the work for you before you even pick up your guitar and play a note. The emotion's already there. You just got to identify it and follow it. And you're halfway there. You're halfway home, and you haven't even played anything. So I think that's where I start. What is the emotions? Now, how can I bring that out, follow that, enhance it? Or if you wanted to be contrarian, how do I go against it? You could do that too. It's less common, but you could. But now you're consciously making the choice to follow that feeling or go against the grain, go against the feeling. You could do that too. But now you're choosing the expression that's coming out. It's not just playing random licks over the chord progression. Right? I mean, that's what we do when we start learning how to play, but your favorite players aren't doing that. Okay. Van Halen wasn't doing that. So Steve Vai doesn't do that.
Right. And so after you have decided how you're going to follow the emotion or play against it, on a tactical level, do you have maybe a step-by-step process for how at least a beginner or somebody newer to this might actually create a phrase or create a lick to follow over, let's say, a 1 chord?
Yeah, first thing is, let me draw another picture. I think what a lot of people do, let's say they're solo, let's say they're going to play over 8 bars or 8 measures, okay? So these are our 8 measures, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, and most people, what they do is, most students or amateur level players, what they do is they just start kind of playing here, and they play notes, and they continue playing notes, and they string licks together or do random stuff, and it kind of looks like that. It's just a continuous, never-ending stream of notes. But think about a singer. Does a singer do that? Like, no singer does that, right? First of all, they can't because they have to breathe. They have no choice. But second, this would be just like a run-on sentence listening to somebody who never shuts up. You don't hear that. If you listen to a saxophone player, you also wouldn't hear that. They also have to breathe generally. Okay. But it's not just because of physical limitations that they have to breathe and we don't. That's not the only reason. It's because it sounds good when we are creating phrases. Here's a phrase. Here's a phrase. Maybe there's a longer phrase here. Then here's a phrase. Here's a phrase. There's a longer phrase here. If you think about phrases and phrase length, one measure or a half a measure, one measure, now two measures, and now you set up a pattern. Okay. So now your thought process doesn't start here and end over there. It starts here and ends here. You're thinking this far. How do I create a nice phrase from here to here that says something? A beginning, a middle, and an end. Stop. Next chord, next measure. Same thing. Not the same notes, but beginning, middle, end. Same thing here if we go longer. Beginning, middle, end. Just thinking this way will force you to think more about phrasing instead of just random, just playing a whole bunch of notes and a bunch of licks and wiggling your fingers up and down the scale. Okay. So that's one thing that you can do. The second thing you can do is when you play a phrase, okay, instead of going on, stay here, stay there and repeat that a whole bunch of times, refining it, making it better, improving it in any way that you can imagine before you're going on to the next one. Don't just play and play and play and play. When you get more experience, then yeah, you can play freely and because that sounds good and that sounds good and that all sounds good. But when you're starting out, or if you're not as creative or expressive as you want to be, the way to get there is to stay right there and then go to this one and stay right here and refine it and make it better. Don't just go on like we talked about earlier. So those are some things that you can do. Now, there are additional technical things you can do. You can think about what are the notes in the chord? Should I hang on the notes in the chord? Should I, create dissonances and resolve it? That's a longer conversation. But I think start here. Start with this.
It sounds like different types of backing tracks would make it easier to practice this sort of thing than others. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. So you want me to expand on that?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Yes. Great point. I should have mentioned this myself earlier. The best backing tracks for learning to become more expressive or improvising are slow tracks that has one chord in it. And that's it. One chord, slow for 5 minutes. Why? Because when the tempo is faster or when chords change, the notes that are consonant and dissonant, in other words, the notes that are tense or are not tense, notes that are in the chord and not in the chord, change every time the chord changes. So it's like someone hits the reset button. As soon as you think, okay, this C note sounds pretty good, feels good over this A minor chord. Yes, but as soon as the chord changes from A minor to G, well, now this note, which was a nice consonance, is a stressful dissonance. It's the fourth over the G chord. Okay. So you were just starting to get the kind of the sound and the feel. But now the chord changes. That note clashes against this chord. Doesn't mean you can't play it or can't use it. It just means you got to be more careful. So a single chord, 5 minutes, slow tempo, get comfortable with the feeling. So you're not being distracted by, oh, what's the next chord? What notes are in that chord? Where am I now? Where should I go? Forget all that. Keep it simple and refine.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Okay, so let's now switch to the topic of songwriting, which is kind of relating to improvising and writing solos, except you're just writing more stuff when you write the song.
Yeah.
A lot of people complain about writer's block and not having ideas. Now, I can see how a lot of the things you've already said apply to songwriting very clearly, but maybe expand on this, or I guess zoom in on how to apply those things specifically to songwriting and writer's block.
Okay. I've got a pretty long video on YouTube that people can check out later if they want to on my channel on YouTube. The video is called "How to Overcome writer's block for songwriters. If you go to the channel, just search for that. I tell a pretty long story there about my experience in university being a music composition major. I'll give you the very short version right now. When I went to Roosevelt University as a music composition student, first semester, day one, I walk into the class with all the other comp students, and the teacher says, the teacher's got a box, okay? And in the box are sticks. Yes, sticks, okay? And he says, everybody take 2 sticks. And I'm thinking, what are you doing here? So I take out my 2 sticks, and the next guy takes out his 2 sticks, and the girl down the line, she takes out her 2 sticks. And he says, guess what we're going to do? You are going to write a piece of music for 2 sticks. This is a true story. And I'm immediately angry. And I'm thinking, I'm paying a lot of money to be sitting here. And I'm paying cash to be, in fact, not even paying cash. I had to go in debt to be here. And then I had to pay off the cash later. Okay, to be sitting here and you're handing out 2 freaking sticks and I'm going to write a piece for 2 sticks. That's what we did. Day after day after day. Now, what I realized later was what the professor was trying to do was trying to take all the different aspects of songwriting and split them apart, going down to one element at a time. And the first element that we were given was rhythm. Took away all notes, all chords, all melodies, all changes of timbre, right? The sticks, only you hit them together, make one sound and one sound only. The only thing that we had was rhythm. And what that did is it trained us, it forced us into only writing, thinking about rhythm. See, that's called practicing songwriting. He didn't say, hey, go to the piano and just like noodle around and write a song. That we wouldn't have learned anything that way. So we spent a lot of time just focusing on writing for rhythm. Obviously, everything we wrote was garbage, right? No one was going to take this and say, hey, put this on, put it on an album and say, listen to my piece of 2 sticks, right? It's all garbage. But that was the point. We're writing for the garbage can, meaning you would spend all day writing. At the end of the day, you'd play it, see how horrible it sounded because it's rhythm only, take the paper, crumple it up, throw it in the garbage. You come back 2 days later, same class, and you do it all over again. But you were a little bit better now, rhythm-wise. So I found that experience to be pretty harsh and pretty frustrating for me at the time because I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't wise enough at the time to realize how incredibly valuable that actually was. I was just a dumb kid who didn't know anything.
Did the professor explain it to you that that's why you were doing it, or
about halfway through the semester, and I'm pissed the whole time. I walked into the dean's office. I made a big deal about it. Okay, so yeah, but about halfway through, he started to explain this is why we're doing this, and he told us a story about why he didn't tell us on day one why we were doing it this way. He said, I wanted you to experience this first because I know that you're all bored and I know you're all frustrated. And that's the point. Because if I didn't force you to go through this, you would never do it on your own. And he was absolutely right. I wouldn't have done it on my own. So I'm not suggesting for anyone listening that they should get 2 sticks and write a piece of music every day for 3 months for 2. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that you focus on one element at a time. Get better with writing just melody, no rhythm, no chords, no instruments, one line at a time. Get good at it, and you do it by practice. Then just rhythm, then just harmony. In no particular rhythm, no other instruments, just block chords. Okay, no melody, no rhythm, nothing. And you go just dynamics, single note, no chords, and you just get better at writing dynamic curves. Things like that really, really build songwriting skills very quickly. But you've got to be willing to go through that, and at the end of the day or end of the month, realize I still don't have a song. I just have a bunch of pieces of paper that I'm going to throw in the garbage at the end. But what you have are skills. And now with those skills, you can really write better music and you can write it faster and it's easier.
So you mentioned some of the elements of songwriting, like well, you got the musical elements. You have rhythm, melody, dynamics, and so on. What about improvising? So I know you have implied it, but I don't think we've explicitly stated it. That improvising is also can be broken down into elements when it comes to just playing a solo. Can you maybe walk through what some of those elements might be? I mean, phrasing is one. What are some others?
Yeah, well, phrasing is really the structure or form, and phrasing are the two big ones. So structure simply means structure is this, okay? Structure is how long is my improvised solo going to be, okay? So if you were going to write a guitar solo, if you played in a band or you're going to record a song, record an album, you wouldn't just play forever and then the solo ends when you feel like stopping, right? The singer is singing here, stops singing here, you have space of solo, and then the singer or whatever is going to start singing here. So you know you have a definite amount of time that the solo is going to be, okay? So when you practice improvising, instead of putting on a backing track for 5 minutes and just going on and on and on and on, there's no beginning, there's no end, there's no plan because you're just randomly doing stuff. But you can create a plan by saying, I'm going to improvise and then eventually form a solo that is 4 measures long or 12 measures long if you're in blues or whatever it is. Okay, 4, 8, 32, whatever. You have a starting point. Then from that starting point, you have the length. Okay, then you're going to plan out, or when practicing, what are the phrase lengths going to be? Well, maybe it's going to be one phrase per measure, then 2, just like what I wrote here. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe they're all the same. Maybe every phrase is over 2 measures. You're just simply going to give yourself a framework. It doesn't mean you have to stick to it. You can always change it later, but have a starting point, something to work towards. Next thing is, let's say we had 8 measures. Let's say 4 measures. I'll keep this simple. Okay, so here's our 4 measures. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. You know that when you improvise or when you play anything, you're going to have low notes, you're going to have high notes, and you're going to have notes in the middle. Okay, so one of the things that really good improvisers do in their head intuitively, okay, that we need to learn how to do, that means you have to practice it, is you have to make decisions about the pitch range and the melodic curve. That means make a plan. Say, okay, I'm going to start with low notes on the first measure, and I'm going to come up maybe into the mid-range on the guitar. And then I'm going to go up to the high range by the end of the 3rd measure, and then I'm going to come down back to the mid-range. I'm just making this up, okay? There's nothing special about that curve. But now that you have a pitch range, a melodic curve, within your phrases, here's phrase 1, here's phrase 2, and maybe that's phrase 3. Now you have a direction. I'm going to start low. I'm going to go into the middle range. I'm going to go from middle range. I'm going to kind of stay in that middle range. I'm going to go up high, and then I'm going to go back to the middle. If you don't like that, you can flip it upside down and do it the other way. Okay. There's a plan. There's something to shoot for. Now, the more that you plan, the harder it is to improvise freely because you're probably not used to doing that yet. But your favorite guitar players, let's assume your favorite guitar player is a good guitar player. They do this in their head automatically. They do it instinctively. Okay. They don't need to write it out on paper or whatever. They're just automatically just doing this. Okay. It's not random what they're doing. Okay. So that's something that you can do. You can establish the phrase length. Establish the solo length, establish the phrases and the phrase length, then pitch range. Okay. So those are some things that you can do to start practicing the development of your skills. At the end, you might think, oh, I tried this and I think what I created kind of sucks. That's okay, because we're not trying in this moment to write an awesome song or an awesome solo. We're trying to build skills. Just like if you did an exercise that you wouldn't put a physical exercise, you wouldn't necessarily put in a song. You're building skills. You're not trying to write a song when you practice your scales and arpeggios or whatever. Same thing here.
Sure, yeah. And I think in the process of doing that, you will also, you may or may not uncover seeds of ideas that you do like. So you may write a 90-second thing that mostly sucks, but within that there was like a little phrase in there or a seed of an idea. You're like, I can use this.
Yeah, definitely. Little motives or little phrases that you can later build on or refine. Absolutely.
Yeah. Very cool. So I like that there's so much more structure to the whole process, or there can be, than many people even realize. I think that's maybe one reason why so many people gravitate towards practicing technique more so than creativity, is because it's very simple in the sense that you can see you're getting faster, you're not, you're getting cleaner, you're not. With improvising or anything creative songwriting, it's like it's not clear how to even track progress, but everything you're describing makes it pretty simple. Just sometimes it's going through the process, and sometimes it is you're setting a goal for, like you said, writing out, let's say, a phrase, not a phrase length, but a pitch range that you're going to follow, and you write 10 solos that way, and you've just simply done that, and you've gotten better at that piece of it.
Yeah, exactly. And when you plan things like this, you start to see, am I able to do this fairly comfortably, fairly easily, or am I stuck having to think about it, start over? Oh, I went too high. Oh, I went too low. The phrase was, I didn't start the phrase here and ended here. I missed the mark. I went too far. I cut this short. Those are objective things that you can measure. So if you just put on a backing track and you just start improvising whatever, yeah, it's really hard to tell, did anything get better here? I mean, you might know if you like what you played or you don't, but how do you measure skill against that? There's no objective standard to measure against. Here, there is. We just created one. Okay. So as you get more comfortable at doing this, you are developing the skills, and you can see that the skills are developing. You're not just guessing or hoping or wondering, I don't know if I got any better, or did I just waste my life the last hour or not?
Yeah, exactly. Well, so when it comes to practicing and fitting all this stuff into a practice schedule on top of everything else that somebody has to practice, like the core skills, they're
Yeah.
picking, their knowledge of fretboard, they're training their ear. If people are doing that, hopefully they are. How would you recommend fitting all these ideas that you've been talking about into, let's say, I don't know, an hour of practicing?
Yeah, great question. So here's a really simple thing that anyone can do. Very, very simple. Let's say you've got a block of time. Could be an hour, could be 20 minutes, whatever you got. Okay. This circle represents a block of practice time. Okay. Now let's say that if you were going to practice something technical, a scale, arpeggio, a lick, something technique related, you might just practice that thing the entire time until you got bored of it, or the time was up, or you moved on to something else, and that's fine. But let's take that same exact thing and let's carve this up into sections. So we're still going to practice the same amount of time. We're not adding any more time, but now with the same technique or the same lick or the same solo or whatever it is you're practicing, okay, you have variation 1, variation 2, variation 3, variation 4, variation 5, variation 6, variation 7. You got 8 variations, same amount of time, same number of repetitions. Okay, so you're still getting your technical practice in, but now you have to think differently as you go from section to section around this little wheel here, and you're just phrasing it a little different. You're doing the vibrato a little bit different. You're doing the bends a little bit different. You're trying to squeeze more emotion out of it. Okay, as you're practicing getting the technique clean and down and smooth, you're also thinking about, how can I make this more expressive? How can I make it sound better? Not just cleaner or faster, that's the technical stuff, but more expressive, where I actually want to listen to this. I would like to put this in a song or a solo. This feels good. This sounds good. People would like to hear it, not because it's just clean and fast, but because it says something. It means something more than just a mechanical, robotic, lifeless exercise. So that's something that you can do with anything. Just divide the time. If this is 500 repetitions, okay, 50, 50, 50, 50, 50, 50, 50, 50. I guess that would be total 400 in this case. But you get the idea. But you're you got the technical practice, but you also have the benefit of the creative side, because those variations force you to think differently and play those things differently than you otherwise would. And it doesn't require any more practice time than what you have now. It's not like you've got to do your technical practicing and then you have to carve out more time for the creative or the expressive side. You can do that, but it's not necessary to kind of combine the two things together. That's one thing. And I'll leave you with the second piece, is that a lot of creativity can be done away from the guitar. You don't need to have the guitar in your hands to do creative things. I mean, if you're eating lunch, could you map that out? Could you make these decisions? Sure, you could. You could do it standing in line. You could do it lying in bed, falling asleep. There's all kinds, way beyond what we're talking about here. Lots of different things that you could do away from the guitar, so that when you have the guitar in your hand, you just start going for it, and you're not sitting there with a pad of paper and a pen planning everything out before you play.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it also goes back to what you were saying in the very beginning about linear versus geometric approach to learning guitar. I think a concern that many people might have is they want to, they need to be okay with the fact that each individual skill might improve a little bit slower, but what you get in return for that, which is arguably much better, is that all your skills, you're getting more broad improvement across all your skills, which makes you a better guitar player overall. And then over time, the individual skills will improve as well, and that is far more valuable than an individual skill getting much better faster. But if it's not integrated with anything, then it's kind of useless.
Yeah, you just used the magic word when you said useless. Listen, the only thing that, in the end, the only thing that matters when it really comes down to it, the only thing that matters is, can you express yourself with the guitar? That's it. There is nothing else. I mean, we're not trying to be robots. Nothing wrong with technical stuff or playing fast or getting things clean. Nothing wrong. That's awesome. Nothing wrong with that. But it only matters what you can play cleanly, what you can play in time, what you can play expressively, what you can play in a real life musical context, what you can play if someone is watching or listening or you're recording. Otherwise, they're just skills that are isolated that don't really mean anything. They're not useful in any way. It would think about all the different things you got to do to drive a car: the steering, the gas pedal, the brake pedal. If you have a manual transmission, there's the clutch, then there's the shifter, there's turn signals. You got to look in the mirrors. You got to watch the road, make sure you're not hitting a dog or a kid or another car or a bus or a tree. You got to watch the traffic lights, the stop signs, all of that stuff. You have to do all of this stuff at once. When you first learned to drive, it was like really overwhelming, which is probably why, if you were like me, your dad took you out into a parking lot where you couldn't hit anything or anyone, and you didn't start with a manual transmission. Okay. You start building one little skill at a time, but you quickly have to start learning how to park and learning how to navigate this and you have to integrate those skills. If you can't integrate those skills, you're never going to get a driver's license. You're not going to pass the test, right? You're not going anywhere. So, integration of skills is the only thing that matters. Same thing here.
Exactly. All right. So, Tom Hess, you have a video about natural talent and installing it into one's guitar playing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, it is essentially, as the title says, how to install natural talent into your guitar playing. You see, most people believe falsely that you're either born with natural talent or you're not. You either have it or you don't have it. And this is false. Natural talent is just the tendency to do the right things in the right. I'm laughing because years and years and years ago, you and I had this argument and we disagreed. And I have since adopted your definition of natural talent, Mike. You turned me. Okay, so I've come to the dark side, and I've adopted your definition. But yes, and your whole thought about it. You were absolutely right the whole time. That natural talent is the tendency to do the right things. Well, anyone can learn the tendency to do the right things, right? That's what practice is for, right? So this is about taking separate skills, piecing them together so it feels natural. So you are doing the right things, the right time, consistently, and putting it all together. So it's a free video. Check it out. It's no strings attached. Just download the video. You're gonna love this because it's gonna change how you think about practicing and how you approach what you do with the skills you already have to start tying things together.
Awesome. And the link to that is tomhess.net/talent. And also it's in the description of this video, so you can check that out there. And I also have a video masterclass about building speed, because that is something that I primarily talk about. And that is a new way to build guitar speed that goes far beyond just the traditional way of starting slow and gradually increasing speed a few BPM at a time. If you've already tried that, and most people have, you quickly run into a bunch of roadblocks with that. So this guitar speed formula method shows you a different way to practice that is pretty simple. It doesn't require a lot of practice time or any special skills. You can learn it today and you can start getting faster with it by tomorrow. It's also free. Check it out at this link and enjoy. All right. So Tom Hess, thanks very much for coming on today and sharing a lot of great stuff. Hopefully everybody was taking notes and watched this a bunch of times, because there's a bunch of stuff to unpack there. So thanks, Tom Hess. Thanks, everybody. Great to be here. Take care. See you guys soon.